Everybody, and welcome to the tutorial. I am Steve and I am at 3D Slasher. Welcome to the channel. So Blender 3.4 stable is out. What does that mean? Well, if you don't see the splash screen with the 3.4, then you don't have the right version. And I'm just going to jump over here to the Blender launcher. So if you've got the Blender launcher, you can go over to your downloads and to the stable. You'll see some other things in the daily. You could find your 3.4 stable under the stable tab, and I downloaded this. So the difference is you had the 3.4 alpha and the 3.4 candidate, but now with the 3.4 stable, there's some very interesting upgrades. And I watched one of the demonstrations from one of the creators, the guy that actually wrote the code that puts the cycles path guiding into effect instead of ray tracing, and it's so huge. So check this out. I'm in 3.4 stable, and I've got a render from the CPU, and I've got a render from the GPU, and I also have a render, and I also have a render from the previous 3.3 LTS. So I'm highly recommending everybody comes over to the 3.4 stable, because if you don't, you're missing out on some amazing technology. So without further ado, let's jump right in. I've got this scene that I was inspired with this Skyrim video I saw, and I love Skyrim. If anyone loves it, man, hit the like button down there, because I love it too. And I'll just flip over to the video for a second. Turn the volume down a little bit. I'm sure you can hear the volume, but this blew me away when I saw this, and I was thinking, I think I can do better than this. I love making environments and snow and everything else, and then this first cutscene, like right here, this one where they show the lake, the trees, the mountain, the fog or volumetrics or whatever they're using. And now my scene is still a work in progress, but I went ahead and did a couple of renders. So if we come over here, we'll see the 3.3 LTS, which ultimately it's not that bad. But if you know anything about ray tracing, then you know this is a little bit better on lighting perhaps, but this is about as good as it's going to get. And so then I rendered with the 3.4, and I got this. And this just blew me away, because it's calculating the light coming through the trees. It's not just casting the shadows. And if you come over here, you can see my little Renzo character, and you can see the tree branches, the leaves. And then if you slide over here, I enabled caustics. So apparently the last thing they did with caustics was you went from 4 bounces to 10 bounces of caustics, and I've got to look it up, but they said they upgraded the caustics as well, and I'm only going to be covering the cycles path guiding in this, but I will follow up with some more videos about the new features. And so the caustics are doing their thing here, and so the scene overall and the light calculations. So if I flip back over to the other version, I mean, it's incredible. So obviously there's a little more lighting in this one, but still, if I would have dropped the lighting in this one, it would have been the same result. And so you can take a look at a side-by-side difference of the light coming through the trees and the light coming from across. It's just one shadow. That's all cycles too. And so if I come back over here, you can see how the light's coming through. And I can adjust this more, bring down the intensities, do a lot of stuff. But I just want to show you guys a side-by-side comparison. Now, how do you use it, right? You got to know how to use it. So I'll jump back over to my scene, and as you can see in the render properties here, I'm under GPU compute, and you don't see the path guiding anywhere. But if you go from GPU to CPU, a new thing will pop up, and that thing is going to be path guiding. So now, and I turned this up to 256 real quick, just what I learned. So in ray tracing, you're shooting out, and let me just do an example on the screen as I'm talking. So if you're going to and you have light coming in from a source, it's going to hit your geometry or whatever's in the scene, and the raycasting is trying to calculate those light bounces. And let's just say this was like a room, right? And so these, like the old ray tracing, is gonna like bounce off and take like this average in the room, and it's not even that good. So let me remove that. So now with the path guiding, what it's going to do is your light's going to hit in the scene, and then another object that is over here that should have the proper light emitting. Well, this, according to samples, is going to start calculating all of this, and the samples are over here. So it starts off with 128. That's fine. You got a slow PC. Don't put it below that, but you definitely go up. And so it's an average over time is the very simplest explanation that you're going to get for the path guiding. And what it's doing is it's just taking those samples over time. And let's go look at the documentation, because this is actually very helpful. So if you come down to path guiding, it's going to reduce noise in the scene when finding past the light is difficult for regular path tracing. For example, when a room is lit through a small door opening, important light directions are learned over time, and that will improve the samples for the number of samples that are taking. Now this works with diffuse BSDFs, and it's really good on surfaces, and like if you have some light scattering going on, like especially light coming through a door like they say here, but light through a window is going to be intense. It's going to be so much better. And this is really exciting because I was kind of like losing hope today. You know, I'm doing this render and I'm like, I got to go try the cycles path guiding. And so then when I jumped back over, man, and I got this, I mean, I was blown away because I haven't seen anything like this in Blender yet. And so that light's coming through there, and I can change like the density of my trees or something to bring out some more of that and have some more of that scattering. And then the light across the mountain looks very correct. It looks aesthetically pleasing as well. Now I didn't render out my volumetrics in this version, but once I do, it renders out volumetrics too. So you're going to have a bunch of new features to work with, or should I say a bunch of new results. And denote that this is going to work amazingly with diffuse components on surfaces. And then, just like I was saying, enable path guiding inside of volumes. So now you've got an advanced tab. Okay, so you can come through and make some more modifications. All right, so the first thing you have here that we're going to go over is the sample offset. So if you come over, you'll see you have a sample offset, and this is going to be used when you're rendering this across multiple computers, so you can offset the number of samples that are going to be taken. And that's for computers that are going to combine those images. And then you have the supported types here. Now, also what they did is they integrated a seed value, so you can kind of play around with the noise patterns. So you could change the seed value here to get some different noise results. And I didn't do any of this yet and still came up with a tremendous render. So this is going to beg a little bit more practice to go through all this. And I think everybody's going to need it, but I'll give you all the basics here. Also, we have an animated seed lock icon. This one's really important, especially if you're going to be doing an animation, and each keyframe is going to change the noise pattern, which would be ideal anyways. You would not want the same noise pattern going through every single frame. And this is going to have an animated value. So what you can do is you can go to frame 1, and then what I would do is just come up here and you can hit I in this selection seed box here, and then potentially go to 250. And then come up here, put 250 and press I. And now each one of those frames are going to render a slightly different seed value for the noise pattern. So that's going to be very important, and you're going to want to do that for your animations. Now you've got two patterns for scrambling distance. This one, the progressive multi-jitter, is going to be like the primary one that you would use. and it is the only one that's going to support scrambling distance. So if you use the progressive multi-jitter, that's the ones you're going to want. And then you've got the So Will Burley, and it does not. It's just another pattern. Also, you've got the sample offset. Now, if you're rendering, like I believe this applies to a render farm, but if you're going through a number of different computers and the images are going through, you can do the sample offset here, and you get a brief description. The number of samples to skip when starting a render can be used to distribute a render across multiple computers and combine images. And then it gives you the image types. And now if you wanted to just go ahead and leave the scrambling distance set to automatic, that's how I'm going to start doing my renders for now. And then if I come up with something better, I will share that. And then you can just go ahead and set it to automatic and use a formula to adapt the scrambling distance based on the sample count. So that's pretty important. So if you come back and you change the sample count, and you bring it up, you're going to get much better results. And it's definitely, and remember, this is all CPU rendering, and I did probably like 10 different renders today just to practice it. And I found out that on my 3060 NVIDIA, and I can't use my optics GPU, I'm just using the CPU, which is an i9 core, and it's very good. It's actually pretty fast. It was about 3 to 4 minutes per render on this particular scene, and it's not a really heavy scene. There's not a lot of stress on it. I do have some textures. They're all procedural. I even created my own water texture. So, I mean, everything is, it's very, very low for resources. So it took me about 2.5, 3 minutes on the actual final. I did add a little bit more of a light to it. So for those two images I showed you guys. And so that was like the only difference in that one. The one with the extra light took about 5 minutes. Now it's cool, you can also do this in the viewport. It's not just in the render, so you can click the viewport, and I just always get worried about these somewhat experimental features. Even though it's a stable version, they do warn you it can cause some flickering when, like if you were to switch over, and we'll see, we'll see how this works. Let me pick up my camera view so I can see the original camera view. And I've got proxy instances because I'm using IA scatter, which is something that you can find down below. Got a link for it. It's amazing. You put 100,000 instances in the scene and still work in the viewport. It's really cool. And then I used Philogix PBR Painter Pro, which there's a link down in the description as well, to put the snow on the mountain in the background. And then of course I used like a basic procedural for the bottom. But if you're interested in that, I've got a tutorial coming on how to make snow procedurally with PBR, and I'm not doing it any other way from here on out. You can keep the geometry nodes and keep everything else because I can scatter this with curvature and a whole number of other things. I can add ambient occlusion, and I can do all these different things that I can't necessarily do with the geometry nodes at so quick. I mean, so quick. All right, so the next thing is the multiplier, and it's talking about GPU rendering performance. You can't, if you have GPU selected right now, it's not supported. So don't even bother. You're not even going to see that. So just kind of like skip those things for now, and I'll definitely update. And I know there's a lot of other people doing tutorials on this, but one of us are going to update you, and it's important. And I'm very thankful for all the other people because no one tutorial creator is going to cover everything. They're just not. All right, so next we've got the minimum light bounces, and then we've got minimum transparent, and then we got light threshold and layer samples. So the minimum light bounces, and I heard the guy talking about this. He's like, they're literally playing Russian roulette to see which one is going to contribute to the path. And so setting that higher is going to give you better results, and those better results will actually end up being less noise. And so if you turn this up here, and I think it's probably safe to go to about 2. I wouldn't do too much more than that. And I'm going to render this back out, and you can see it in the viewport. I really like how this is starting to turn out. If you want to render more, I'm going to find out what the appropriate amount is, but I'm viewing this as an up-res factor, just like when you're doing water simulations. And we shall find out what it takes to crash it, and I'll come back with a video on that. Okay, so the next one, the warning is you don't want to use this on the geometry of hair or volumetrics. Okay, and that will be the minimum transparent bounces. And this can also reduce noise. And I do have volumetrics that's going into this, so I'm going to leave that at 0. I'm not even going to mess with it. And now this last one's really cool, but it's going to be kind of tricky. And the light threshold. So if you have the light set, the light threshold set at a certain setting, it's going to terminate the actual light samples that are contributing less than the threshold to the scene and use other ones instead to make the final calculations. So this is something I'm actually going to play with this, because this is perfect for an environment, because there's a lot of light coming in from all over the place, but I want to get the maximum calculations that are going to produce like really good results. So I wouldn't want to be wasting a bunch of light somewhere where it could be nicely spread on the mountain, then coming through the trees and the water caustics and things like that. So I can enhance that. And then by raising this ever so slightly, you can change that. And you see it actually reduced the noise coming through the trees just a little bit, or rather that noise pattern. And it looks like it's bringing just a little bit more light here, and I've got some more starting up on the water. So that's something to experiment with as well. Now I would say there's a bunch of more stuff coming with this, but guys, it's Blender. And I mean, it's literally growing every single day. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of my renders looking like that. That is garbage. Even if I change the lighting and do all this extra work on it, it doesn't look like this. And so I could pull this into the compositor, do a nice transparent background and all that, and come up with some really good results. So hey guys, thanks for watching. Like I said, this video is just covering the cycles path guiding, and remember, you have to switch that from GPU compute because everything disappears and there's nothing there now. You do have all the seed value and everything else, but if you go to CPU rendering, also make sure that you don't do needless renders, and come over to the edit preferences, and then once you're inside of preferences, I think you go to system, and make sure if you've got a nice CPU, it's gonna pop up somewhere, whether it be the CUDA, the HIP, and select it. Happy rendering, everyone, and I will see you guys in the next tutorial lesson.